find out if we could swap out the legal B, the request to review and consider revisions to local board policies EFA and EFB to now, if
Sure.
possible.
Yeah.
Just
if we
because
don't
in
have
an
any-
effort.
Yeah, I think we can move that up.
Who are we
Is
moving
that
up?
okay?
Hold on, we're moving up?
Moving up, 10B, board member request to review and consider revision of local policy EFA. We'll just move that up to now. Ms. Gladys, is that, okay, very good. All right, moving on to item 10B, board member request to review and consider revision of local board policy EFA.
Mr. President?
I was going to turn the time over to Ms. Nelson. This is her to introduce it, but go ahead.
Great, thank you, President Hubert. As parents continue to bring questionable books, I feel that it is important that we put something in place sexually explicit in the definition. So I have worked really hard with Ms. Gladys. I was able to pull Katy ISD's policy, and then Ms. Gladys and I, well, Ms. Gladys did more of the brunt of the work, but kind of tailored it to our district and our needs. And then she was able to get that out for other trustees' review and comments. So I appreciate your hard work and hope that we can come to a resolution.
Mr. President?
Yes, sir.
We've had multiple board meetings as well as a board workshop regarding our library books policy. We've discussed this topic ad nauseum. That being said, I don't see any additional value in us discussing that topic today. So I want a motion that we table this discussion.
Hearing no second to the motion, the motion fails. We will continue moving forward with this.
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
I'd like the motion that we make no changes to our current policy as written.
Okay. Any seconds for that? All right. Having no second for that, that motion fails as well.
Let's do it.
Okay. So review and consider revisions. So could you point out just a couple of, I did read through it. Is the revision that we have, is this the one that we received last week, or is this the one we received
Maybe Ms. Gladys, could you explain the two colored copies that
We've
you
had
have?
a couple, and so I just want to make sure I'm looking at the right one.
Sure. So yes, I've sent several things back and forth to you guys. So I put, to maybe make it easier, colored coded copies there. The green one is the latest revision, starting with the Katy policy as the base, and then making changes that were not substantive to it, but to maybe align the wording to make it more streamlined, more user-friendly. And then the yellow policies are the current Katy policies as they are written in their policy manual, so for comparison purposes.
Ms. Gladys, did you give consideration to Willis ISD's policy, Spring ISD policy, the Aldine ISD policy? Is Katy ISD policy the gospel for us to use here at CISD?
I did not. I was asked to look at the Katy policy. That's the one I looked at.
I think that it's worth noting that in a comparison with our current policy, EFB local, it mentions harmful materials and obscene materials as listed in the Texas Penal Code 43.24 and 43.21. But the latest edition of sexually explicit materials, which is defined in the Education Code 33.021, gets us aligned, and I think it's the missing point, the missing part that we've had in our policy. And there are a few other things in here that are in addition to what we have listed. So I hope that trustees had a moment to look through it, and certainly here to do this together and make this work.
Ms. Gladys, how long has this current policy served this district?
Conroe ISD's current policy.
I think we adopted it in August of last year, August, September.
That's correct.
So I've been on the board for the last 11 years. School books has been the least of our concerns. Dr. Knoll, is that your understanding of the situation, that school books is more precedent, some of our other prevailing issues? School books?
we have a lot of issues that we deal with every day. So if it's the board's concern, it's our concern.
Understood. So when the board concern, I mean, I understand what was presented as if the constituents' concern is about school books. I don't see that. I see that there was a concerted effort, received several emails. That effort was generated by one individual who seeks attention, whose whole expectation is to cause the demise of the public schools districts, public school system in general. And of those emails, I think I received 80, 90 emails. So I don't see that as a public concern. At the most, 80, 90. I don't see that as a serious public concern, a material public concern about school books, being that each one of those emails was pretty much templated from this individual.
Again, I'm capable of thinking for myself, so this is certainly not prompted by anybody's ideas. Katie, I think, is a great example for us because it's similar in size, and it's putting us in compliance with HB 900.
I understand. I think I'm in the best position to give my interpretation of what my constituents was like. As it relates to, matter of fact, I got a question for you. So we received, give or take, what, 80 emails?
I don't know how many you received.
It was 50, 60 emails.
I think I received probably 200, over 200 emails about this, both for and against.
So let's just say
any kind of
half
change.
against? Half against? I tell you what.
I don't know. I mean,
just bear with
I
me.
don't think so, but go ahead with your point.
Bear with me, I'll make my point. Dr. Povich, you're a mathematician, aren't you? So let's assume we got, you got a calculator right quick? Just make sure you do the numbers for me. Let's assume we have 70,000, a little over 70,000 kids in the district. 70,000 kids, assuming they have two parents. Let's make that denominator 140,000. We're on point? 140,000. Give the numerator 100. What percentage you come up with? So we got 100 emails out of, what was that? 100? 100 emails, about 140,000, just parents of students.
I don't know that this number is relevant.
It's relevant to me. So not 1%. Coincidentally, that's probably the probability of you finding an inappropriate a book of the millions of books that we got in our libraries.
You must not be reading your emails.
0.001. So that's not even 1% you just mentioned, right? Not
Well,
1%.
If we're talking about numbers, I would love to talk about the number of voters we had. I believe I had about 43,000 voters vote for me in a group of 6.
Clock's
Right.
right. A broke clock's right once every day. I've been sitting here 11 years, 3 terms, unopposed.
If I may,
What that have to do with the price of tea in China? I don't understand that.
I understand. If I may, I've been trying to be diligent on this as well, and so if I could ask just a couple of questions as well. Adding, from what I see, our current policy lists, let me back up for a second. Our current policy has in Penal Code 43.21, and then, what's the other one? The 2 penal codes, obscenity and, okay, and then, but what we don't have in our policy is really the Education Code 33.021, correct?
Defining sexually explicit materials.
Right.
That's one of the things that's not mentioned.
Okay, just work with me on this one so far, because I know I've got a couple questions. So my question is, by adding this educational code, which I'm not against at all, adding that in here, it's part of the educational code. Do we adhere to the educational code already?
Well, if you recall, that bill is kind of in litigation right now, and what that definition applies to is the way the vendors were required to rate their books,
Okay.
and that's on hold. And so, yes, we comply with the law the moment it's passed, and it becomes effective regardless of whether it's in a policy or not. And that will be it will be in the legal policies, EF.
Okay, so I don't.
I have the Texas Education Code 33.021 right here. And it was adopted September 1st, 2023.
Okay, that's, so what I'm saying is we can, I don't see any reason why we can't have that in this policy as well. It strengthens our policy, but it just, I guess it reconfirms, right? It reconfirms that, you know, it's in the Texas Education Code, which we follow, but it is also in our policy enforced twice. So you know, I kind of like that. I don't see where there's any issues of enforcing, because we're already enforcing it now. We're going to continue to enforce that. The other question I had was the elementary school on the no material in elementary school library shall contain depictions of sexual acts or simulation of such acts, and it goes on. We define elementary schools as K through 6, correct? I mean, so would our schools are set up that way? Like, we have some that are flex, and we have some that have a 5th and 6th. Would we have the ability? Is that in the new revision here, and would we be able to enforce that as well?
We did modify that provision to include pre-K through intermediate in that section.
Okay, very good. And then the other one, if you don't mind me asking, I have two more.
No, go for
Okay,
it.
and then the other one is when it comes to the committees, was there a rendition? I believe the Katie policy, we have a policy where we have a committee that we kind of call when it's time. And the Katie policy had committees called ahead of time. And I believe I read in there that the committees on the Katie, that the people that were on that committee, parental and district employees, that their names were kept confidential. But I believe we found out through, I don't remember who, I think it was Paxton that sent a letter saying, hey, we have to disclose the district names. So is it written in the new one where we would still continue to have we have, it's very similar, but it's different because we don't keep those names confidential?
I think I changed it to the parent names to be confidential
Okay.
because that is the law.
Okay. And then my last one is, let me see if I can find it. At the board meeting, the board member who, let's see here, in accordance with board policy, any board member may request an agenda item for the board's next regular meeting agenda to review an instructional material for removal by notifying the superintendent and board president. So right now, as a constituent has an issue that they feel the book needs to be reviewed. The book goes to a committee. If they don't like that, how the committee determines the book, they can go to a level 2. A level 2 is a hearing with somebody else, and if they don't like that, then it comes to the board. If I'm reading this correctly, and I could be wrong, does this mean that a board member would be able to bypass all of those things and go directly to the board for a vote?
There's several provisions in there, and some of them could happen directly from the board. In the Katie policy, a board member could bring a book directly to the board, or a board member could appeal the decision of the reconsideration committee and skip level 2 that's currently in our policy. So there's kind of several different mechanisms in there for a board to take action prior to a level 3 hearing.
So I would, if you would entertain it, I don't have any issues with any of this stuff. I like the idea of strengthening it, but I just have a little bit of an issue with that because I want to make sure that parents have a say-so, just like, you know, that,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
I would like to point out that Katie's policy has it where 2 board members
Right.
that work in concert. So we did change that to adjust it as per Mrs. Gladys' recommendation. I mean, I think well, I guess I would just start by asking, I recently heard you say that you removed 100 dirty books from CISD libraries. So I guess what's the difference between that? Because I'm not familiar with these books that were removed. It didn't come to the board. or it didn't come to me at least.
Right.
So I guess that's kind of where that falls into play, because if it's not in policy, then it really doesn't exist.
Right.
So,
So what I was referring to is the over 100 books that have been removed from the district because they didn't meet the district's selection criteria. And those books are listed on the school website. So when I said, hey, we've removed these books, that was what I was
yeah.
talking
So
about.
I looked, I didn't see 100, and also I've heard you say it twice now that you personally removed. First, it started out as 55 books, and then it was 100 books.
Yeah, I said, as board president, that's what we have done. And it's a true statement. As board president, while I've been on the board, we have removed those books.
So then
But they were about the selection criteria, right? It wasn't, the selection criteria is different. If a book does not meet the selection criteria, then it doesn't belong. And the wonderful things that has happened is you and other board members have brought some awareness to our libraries. So what has happened, which is the good thing, is our librarians in our district and people have said, well, let's start combing through. And as they've combed through, they have found books that have not met the selection criteria. So those are the things that I've been talking about. This is different. This is a book that's being challenged, a book that has met the selection criteria. It doesn't break the penal codes, and I'm telling you how I interpret it. And then somebody says, I want to challenge this book. I want to challenge this book. So a constituent has to go through a process. The way I read this is a board member can say, I'm going to bypass the process and just bring it right to the board for a meeting. What I'm asking is, would we at least be able to put something in there? And Ms. Gladys had several different suggestions, and we talked about it. And I like the suggestion of not necessarily taking that away from a board member, but if a board member finds a book that they feel needs to be challenged, that book goes to a review committee and then come to. That's all I'm saying is just is have the board members follow the same criteria as just a regular Joe Q public in our district. That's all I'm asking.
For the committee, you mean? For the reconsideration committee?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, for the book to go through the committee.
Well, isn't that what you bypassed with the Shack committee?
I'm sorry. What do you mean?
So,
Look.
No, I want to hear that. I'm not sure I understand.
well, I'm just saying that, to me, having one board member, so you have an option. So if you see someone that comes to you with a book and brings it to you and it's so foul or whatever, you don't know how it got in, and who knows how these books are getting in, but it's so foul, it would then, you have a choice as a board member. You could then take the book to this dais and put it up for a vote. Or you could just say, take it to the challenge. And again, I don't see much of a difference between doing with the one board and actually bringing it for full transparency to the dais for a vote versus you going in and whatever you did to get them removed.
Well, so once again, I'm talking about, and for clarity, I'm talking about books that don't meet the selection criteria. I'm not talking about books that have made the selection criteria, but parents are struggling. Like for example, some of the books that were read today, I haven't heard of any of those books. I don't know if they meet the selection criteria, but if they do, those parents have the right to say, I'm going to challenge this. I think this is an inappropriate book. So those books, I didn't touch. I'm talking about the school district.
No.
We reached out to the school district. Allow me to finish.
Okay.
We reached out to the school district and said, books that don't meet the selection criteria, can you please go through those and remove those books? And the district said, yes, we'll take that challenge and we're going to do it. What you're saying, if you're saying a book that is so grotesque, my question is it so grotesque and it and it doesn't meet the selection criteria?
That's right.
Okay, then that book doesn't need to come to a committee.
So then the
That's my
process would
point.
work. If this process is in place, then the
100%
process will
agree.
work.
I'm certainly not arguing that point,
Yeah.
right? I think any of us can do that, can bring a book and say, hey, I don't think this book meets the selection criteria.
Right.
Can you please check to make sure this book meets the selection criteria? I don't think the board needs to be involved in that process. That we already have a process for that. What I'm saying is a book that, the way I read it, a book meets the selection criteria, and then a board member says, I don't like this book for whatever reason they feel that is appropriate, and they're going to bring it directly to the board for us to vote on, and it did not go through any kind of process for a committee of parents, because we want our parents to be involved, and we've created this parental committee to review a book, but a board member is bypassing that, which a constituent can't do. We're writing in a policy. It's like rules for thee, but not for me. Like, I get to do what I want to do. I can pull this book, but you can't. And I'm just saying, I would entertain an idea that if we did find a book that met the selection criteria and we still were uncomfortable with it, that it would at least go through the parent-involved committee before it came to the board for a level 3. That's what I'm asking. That's all I'm asking.
Can I comment?
Sure.
Okay. One, I'm deeply concerned because it seems the board once again is overstepping their bounds. And I think what we're having here is some subtle political debates, which I'm not necessarily want to be entertained by. I'm also concerned that what's implied here is, as much as we say we love our teachers and educators, they're professionals, they know what they're doing, and we trust them, our kids, what we're saying essentially is they're incompetent. We just need to say it if we're going to do it, just say it. I think we're saying they can't do their job. We're sitting up here, in my 11 years sitting on this board, we've never sat here and debated on how to write a policy. You guys did that and we approved. We trust that you guys understand what's the best interest of our kids. When we're talking about blatantly inappropriate books, that implies that you guys sitting there see those books on a day-to-day basis and you ignore them. That's what that implies. Now all of a sudden we're going to put our eyes on them and we're going to make this profound deal, about the books. So I'm opposed to any additional censorship other than what we have, right? And any of these additional distractions relative to school books, because we have enormous amounts of list of items that should take precedent over this. A couple months ago, we weren't even talking about school books. CRT was the big fear-mongering tactic that was being used. I prefer we go back to CRT and leave the school books alone. I honestly do, right? Because at least it's not affecting the kids. And we take one step down this road where we've got school boards sitting up here making dictates, making policies, deciding what books kids get to read. It's a slippery slope. One step is a mile to get back. And I caution us from making that step, that mistake, right? And so what I am not want to do is continue to sit here and listen to political debates go one way or another, where one jabs others and others have political rallies over to the left, and my man here's making his points as well, just so we can get fanfare. Not willing to entertain that. Not at the expense of the school district.
Yeah, I don't appreciate being accused of something that, and I presume you're talking about me since I'm the only one that has been mentioned here. If you're okay with sexually explicit material in front of our children, then that's on you. But for you to say that we are inappropriate or we're political, I don't know if I'm running for office, I'm not sure, but that is completely inaccurate.
Mr. Williams, I can speak a little bit to it. I am okay with us reviewing and strengthening policy. I feel like that's what we're in the process of doing. If moving, I read a lot of emails both ways, and we've been hearing about it not just over this last couple of weeks, but we've been hearing about it for about a year or so. And so I'm okay with us looking at ways that we can strengthen. I don't see any issue with anything other than I just don't feel comfortable writing in a policy that allows a board member to have some type of fast lane that a constituent or a parent doesn't have. So that's the issue that
I'm just saying specifically, and I'll address your question, your concern, Skeeter. I'll ignore the other. I'm just saying anything that we're doing here is seemingly to be a power grab, right? It's a power grab that's going to lead to a slippery slope of overburdening our folks out there in the audience, our school administrators and our teachers, etc., when it's unnecessary. That's what I'm saying.
How is sexually explicit
unnecessary?
unnecessary?
You can go make it as egregious as you want. We can try to make this sound like this is a totally egregious act that somebody's trying to perpetrate, or someone doesn't care about kids and all this other fear-mongering tactics that you want to use. Yeah. But the reality of it is school books are not an issue. Everyone here who showed up and had issues with school books allow their kids to have cell phones. They can take these things and go to porn town if they so choose, but yet we're sitting here talking about school books. My kid has never, and I guarantee you, any of these educators sitting out here, no parent has ever came to them and said their kid has been devastated by a book they read. I would be on the other end of the spectrum. I would love my kid to read every book in that library. Education, right? Right? Education with understanding is helpful, right? That's what it's all about. Let the kids read. It would, guess what? It would prompt discussion. It would prompt understanding. It would prompt a broader view of things. Some of the things they list up here, some folks like those books. They need those books. Those are applicable to their daily lives, right? It may not work for me. It may not be something I would read. It may not be something my kids read. But who am I, right, to put that on your household?
Yeah.
And I just think this is a dangerous slope. So you can say I love porn and I want the kids to see all this and make it as egregious and outrageous as you want it to sound, right? But you're just entertaining self. The reality of it is this is not a pressing issue in our district. You want to deal with pressing issues? Let's deal with homeless kids. Let's deal with special education. Let's deal with overcrowding. Let's deal with drug abuse. Let's deal with teacher retention. Let's deal with police retention. Let's deal with teachers' excessive workloads. Let's deal with academic performance. Let's deal with school board overreach. Let's deal with that. Let's deal with meeting management, school board meeting management. Let's deal with that. All these items, to me, are way more pressing than a book. Leave the books alone. Get back to something else. Go back to the faction that's advocating books all of a sudden across the nation. Go back to them and say, look, let's find something else that's less harmful to the kids. CRT was perfect. Find some scapegoat such as that, some red herring that you guys can use as a rally cry, but don't use school books or any type of literature, educational material as your rally cry.
Mr. Williams.
Trustee Williams, I would encourage you to read your emails of actual photos from books that have been found in our libraries and actual excerpts from books, and tell me again that you don't think we have a problem.
If I may, if we could.
I think we got a problem, but the problem is amongst me, amongst us.
I feel like I'd like to see if there's some other board members that would like to
Yeah, that'd be
give
great.
opinions as well, if anybody,
Thank you.
any other thoughts?
I do want to say thank you to our district for implementing the library notification emails that have been going out. I think that's been incredibly helpful to parents to see what books their children are checking out. And, we're still working out the bugs on that. But that's a great way to bring parents and kids together and talk about the things that they're bringing home from the library. I do agree with President Hubert in regards to the board action where board members would usurp our committee and our parents and our administrators who read the specific books that are in question, because it is important to get their valuable feedback, their opinions through the TEKS. All of that is very valuable to me as a trustee to understand exactly why the book fits the criteria or why it doesn't. Just helps me make a better decision. And so in that instance, I would hope that any policy that we have, that there isn't a fast track, that we do go through our committee process to make sure that everybody has opportunity to give opinions and thoughts on the specific text. And so, there were some changes, some very minor changes, shall and all the little things. But I think we have we already have a very strong book policy. But if there are some little things that we want to change, that's fine. But again, just as long as we're not usurping the committee process. So, thank you.
So, do we have, Ms. Olin, would you like to?
Yeah, sorry.
Sure.
I fell to forgetting to turn that on. I did want to quick point out that the only part of HB 900 that is in question at the moment is correct as far as the vendor rating. But what is under evaluation there at the Supreme Court based on their ruling is that it's an undue, they're challenging that the vendor has to do the rating. None of the other parts that have to do with the education code 33.021 and all the other pieces are not in question. So
Okay.
your question regarding adding that comment in or that code in is
Yeah.
important because that is a new piece to it. Where last year in this year, but earlier in February, you and Dr. Knoll both said it would be nice if we had better clarification of what
Right.
obscene and what explicit sex and so on and so forth. And they did do that, and they did clarify that, and I don't necessarily want to read all that out loud in here. But, I do too believe that we need to add that 33.021 in. I do call into question where some changes were made. There were some that were shall or must or whatever, but when we change shall and may, that is a huge difference of meaning and understanding.
Okay.
My last thing and there are a few of those that got done on the very last revision.
Yeah.
So, but the one other thing that I have a concern with that I mentioned in February and I'll bring today, you're saying you don't want us as a board to fast track a book without being able to have it go through a committee. And while I would respect that, I could see where you're saying you don't want us to have privileges that necessarily a parent may not have or whatever. But on the reverse side, one of the concerns I brought to you was, or the board in February, was that unless a book goes to the consideration committee, it is then appealed if they don't like the result, and then it goes to a level 3. We don't, as a board, ever have a say in on that book, and then it's not allowed to be appealed again or reviewed for a year. But if you're talking fast tracking, or if you're asking for the board to do a reconsideration, are you just asking that the board fill out a form and present it to a reconsideration committee or ask for a reconsideration committee and then their review and then it comes before the board? So what would that look like, I guess is what I'm asking.
That's a fair question. It's a good question. So I believe that what I'm talking about, I think there are two different things. I thought I read in here, and if I didn't, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I read that if a book goes through, not a board member brought forth book, but if a book has gone through the committee and the committee did not vote in favor of the person that appealed the decision, that a board member could still take that book and bring it, even though, they may feel. I like that idea. Sometimes, we might not agree with the committee, and so if a board member sees that, and I think we will, moving forward, get a list of the books that have gone through the committee and the decisions.
You get that presently.
So we get that now. Okay, thank you. So we get that now, the book. So we would be able to bring that, and I would say that book has already been challenged, and so it could certainly come to the committee. I don't see any issues.
To the board?
I'm sorry, yes, thank you. Thank you for the correction. That could come to the board because it's already been through a committee. I don't have any issues with that. I think I was just saying a book. What I could see happening is not necessarily that. I mean, we may find a book. You still have children in the district, and so I call them children. I'm sure they don't appreciate that, but you still have children in the district, and so they're going to have books that you're going to be able to see. I won't. So I could see a scenario where a parent comes directly to me with a book. They're going to come directly to me and say, "Hey, what about this?" And then for me to be able to bring that book directly to the board to vote on, I think that circumvents, if that's the right word, the parental involvement in a committee. I'm just saying I'd like for those scenarios to go through a committee, and then if the decision that the committee makes is not in favor of what a board member wanted or felt like should have happened, then it can certainly come to the board. That's what I'm asking. Is that acceptable?
I don't want to overstep, but can I ask a question or just
Yeah.
clarification from just kind of watching, One thing I want to point out is, we are talking about policy, but the statement, if it's not in policy, it doesn't matter. That's not an accurate statement.
Sure.
95% of what we do is about procedure. That's my duty by law to have procedure. So even though we didn't change the policy in February when we talked about it, we've seen numerous procedural changes that have happened. So, on our website now we have where when we're going to order books, they're up there for a 30-day review. That's a procedural change that's happened. We have the list of books that have been removed due to selection criteria. That's out there for the world to see. We have all the reconsideration committee information out there. We have set up our informal reconsideration committee. I want to point out that not just for the sake of, I know there's been like some eyes and this and that thrown around. Not a single board member has removed a book from this school district, right? That would be outside of policy. That is not the way it works. When a book comes in, I've had, when board members or anybody brings a book to our attention, it goes to our library services team to make a decision. Now, we have had some books that have come in that have been so egregious that it's an immediate decision is made, the book is removed immediately. It is at the very highest level in our library services, it's immediately removed because it is so egregious it does not meet criteria. If there's a question about further than that, it's not an immediate move, then it goes on the list of books to go through our informal process if no one has formally challenged it. I forwarded you all this afternoon the latest list of books that went through our informal process, and that's posted on our website as well, so everybody can see it. So those are all procedural changes that we've still done within our current policy. But to the question on this policy, and I just, what we understand is that no policy changes unless 4 people vote for a policy change. We've done this once before. So just in the spirit of trying to help to get to a point where maybe we can vote on something that we can put in place.
Yeah.
I'm hearing that there would be support for this document, maybe with just a few small changes, if there was an agreement that board members couldn't bypass the original reconsideration process. If you could submit it to the regular reconsideration process, but board members would have the authority, as Ms. Odenweiler just said, to, if a reconsideration committee does not remove a book, even if the original complainant does not appeal, a board member has the right to make that appeal directly to the board and bring it directly to the board. I think it's what you just mentioned, right, Ms. Odenweiler? You didn't want it to die and you not get a chance to pull it forward.
Right,
So you
that
would
was
like,
one of my concerns,
Right.
because sometimes a constituent or
Fair.
a complainant may choose not to appeal for a number of reasons. There's a number of reasons there.
fair enough. Right.
And yet there's concern, which theoretically, if we implement the the Texas Education Code in, we hopefully don't have that many at
Right.
that point.
Fair
But
enough.
True.
it states here, in accordance with board policy local, any board member may request an agenda item in the appeal process. So that's only after it went through reconsideration, which I agreed with everyone
Right.
here. But then there's a second place where board action can take place, and it's on page 8 of 8, where it states, it says at a board meeting, and this is where President Hubert was concerned
Right.
about it not going to a reconsideration committee.
Correct.
So, I have 2 comments on those, but the first one being, so he would like to see, if I'm not misunderstanding President Hubert, you would like to see that in board action on page 8 of 8, that it state that if a board member has a desire for a book to be reconsidered, that they fill out the form, a reconsideration committee is formed, a group, panel, whatever you want to call it, is formed, and it goes through, and then at that point, it's up to a board member to decide if they want to bring it to the board after it's been through the reconsideration committee?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine.
At
I'm
least
just-
that
I'm-
way parents and
Yes.
constituents have seen,
I'm
laid
just trying
eyes
to
on
make
it.
sure that we're in agreement there, so there.
I don't agree with that policy whatsoever. I mean, it seems, I'm telling you, man, you start making this personal about me, it's gonna be a problem. So let me get what I had to say out. I think you going to this committee is a farce. You go into this committee with the expectation they're gonna do your bidding. If they don't do your bidding, you're gonna bring it to the board anyway, right? So why have a school board member send it to a committee, understanding that if the committee don't vote their way, they're gonna bring it to the board anyway? That's a ruse. Why would we do that? And I don't want to be inundated with books that y'all deem are not appropriate. All right? If that staff or that staff member at that level in the library is read that book, looked at that book, then a committee has looked at that book, read that book, and deemed that book appropriate, why are we overstepping once again? You're bringing stuff to the board that shouldn't be coming to the board.
Yeah,
You
first
have
of
a
all, I
process
don't
in place.
appreciate being threatened. Second of all, if the policy, policy works that we put into play, if it works, it won't need to. But I understand, I'm willing to come to a compromise on what you're saying, but I do think that the way this is written, the way the policy reads, it should work.
First of all, I didn't threaten you.
Yes, you did. You said there was going to be a problem.
Well,
What kind of problem were you
Okay,
mentioning?
we
I think
can
you
just
just
move
don't
on
talk
from
to
this.
Back
It's
to
okay.
President Hubert,
Yes, ma'am.
when we were, I think we were coming to an agreement on, at least amongst us, on
Well, I haven't-
several of us communicating.
If it's
here.
okay, we could hear from Ms.
And that's
Young if
fine,
you
but I
have
did want to
anything.
point out the one other thing.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because I hadn't heard from you.
The one other thing I wanted to point out is in both of those, in both of those little segments, in the last revision that was done,
Our revision?
yes, in the last
August?
one that Ms. Gladys sent out.
Oh, yes, okay.
That it, all of a sudden, there was the change from shall to may, and those do not equate. So.
I don't
under-
have an opinion on those, whatever.
Yeah, so that's
Whatever
all I
the
was
board
going to
can-
say, is
can come
originally
with.
when we were doing all the back and forths with Mrs. Gladys, it originally stated shall, it went all the way through until this change, and then all of a sudden it says may, and those do not.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's
We
either
could- we
an
could
up
give
or a
that-
down. I mean, that's really it.
We-
It's an up or a down.
That's part of what we can ask Ms. Gladys to change, to bring to us.
How about this, because my concern, I changed it because it was it implies not compliance with Robert's rules to require a second. So if someone could, I make a motion to remove, ABC book, or that we consider it, and that the board would have to vote without a second. And so how about if I change it to shall consider the item instead of just shall vote, shall consider.
I leave that to Ms. Oldenweiler to answer.
Well, my only concern on that is technically it isn't a Robert's Rules of Order, because what it would do is exactly like what Mr. Williams was trying to do earlier, where he wanted to just not have this discussion. If it gets a second, yes. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And the bottom line is it comes up, if it goes to a vote, let's just say, instead of saying shall vote, then it goes whether it's to uphold, so we're voting, are we going to uphold it? Are we going to modify it? Or are we going to reject it? I mean, and then the Robert's Rules of Orders kick in.
So,
I can play with that language.
yeah, so if
Yeah.
I can just circle back one more time here, just for clarification for Mrs. Gladys and myself. What I'm hearing is that we can work to continue further this language, making the adjustment from the immediate board bringing something to a board member bringing it to the board, but make the adjustment that it would go to the reconsideration committee, and at that point, whether it was board member initiated or not, anything that went to a reconsideration committee, a board member could appeal it directly to the board. We can make that change in policy. We can continue to tweak a few of the shalls and mays. And then at that point, we will share it back out with you all for feedback. And if we need to convene something to hammer out, like the final language, then President Hubert would come to you and ask for that. But and then we could bring forward in November
understand too.
these revisions, Mrs. Gladys. Is that-
Right, and I'll make it to both EFA and EFB, similar, I'll tweak those.
And we're not voting tonight. I just
Right,
need
yeah, we
to
gotta
know,
give
like,
some
is everybody
direction.
okay with that? Because I just don't want to ask Ms. Gladys to do
Well,
a
on
lot
board
and do it.
action, I mean, I'm just trying to clarify,
Yeah.
or on board action, or also adding the Texas Education Code 33.021, 30.21, where it goes. It's in there. It's in
Yeah,
there.
I-
I'm
It's
just
already in
asking,
there.
are we good with
Yeah, it's,
that?
yeah,
Okay.
I would say we would
easy.
start,
100%.
I'm done.
yeah, my preference, or understanding was we were starting with this green document, which that's in there. So we would just be
Wait,
making
that
those-
green document is Conroe's current policy?
No, this is the Conroe version of the Katie policy. Like, so with our
Thank you,
language,
okay.
our elementary designation,
Right.
grade levels.
Just making sure, thank you.
Is this EFB the same one you sent out yesterday afternoon?
It is, but with all the other changes in it. The ones, it's really combines them both. So I sent on maybe Thursday last week, a seriously
Right.
edited document, and then I made a few more changes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it should have
So-
those combined.
Okay, but not the ones that I sent last night, right?
No.
Okay, thank you.
So
That's-
President Hubert, if it's okay with you, we would like to move forward. We'll draw this up. If we get into a point where it's too much back and forth, we just, we may ask you to
That's fine.
to help us to sit down, maybe a couple board members to sit down with Ms. Gladys so that we don't go back and forth 50 times. We can just get it settled in. But
Yeah,
we'll try to get it as
That's
as
fine.
it pleases you guys. We'll bring it back next month. And
Yeah, Dr. Noel, I just have one
yes.
more
Okay,
thing, not
please.
about that, because, not about policy, but you talk
Okay.
about policy and procedure.
yes,
So we have these policies that we've discussed. Procedurally wise, would we need to discuss the procedure of, is it, you have to give the board members 30 days to read the book? Is that to be required? Is that the procedural side that we could talk another time, or does that need to go into policy? Is that a fair question?
Well, it is a fair question. That is one of my issues with this overall, but I did not address any of those issues. This policy contains things that would typically be included in an administrative procedure and are in our administrative procedures, but I did not adjust those because they were substantive.
Well, then I would suggest, if it's okay, I think you've heard where we want to go. Let's see what we come up with next month, and then if we need to go from there, is that acceptable?
I will send a
Madam
red line
Board?
version of what you have in the green policies, okay? So that's where we'll start with.
Okay,
They'll look like this, and then I'll red line them for you, okay?
okay,
Thank you.
very good.
thank you, sir.
Thank you. All right.
Thank
good
you so
good
much.
discussion. Okay. Okay, moving back up to item